And we are live.
I would like to call to order the meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission for April 14th, 2020. Before we begin, I would like to go over some housekeeping details in this very unusual circumstance we find ourselves in. As a preliminary matter, I'm Daniel Drake, the chairman of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. Permit me first to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Arthur Gasparo? Arthur Gasparo? Need to unmute yourself.
I'm here.
Jeanette Topham? Ms. Topham, please, I couldn't hear you. Oh, I can see her responding. You're muted. There you go. You're unmuted now.
Okay, I was before too. Thank
you. Tony Buscarin?
Here.
Andrea Planzer?
Here.
Thank you. Members of the staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tom Rafter?
Here.
Noah Carberg?
Here.
Jamie Sansbury?
Here.
Thank you. Lily Sylvia?
Here.
Katie Perales?
Here.
Thank you. And our other visitor speaker on the agenda is Christina Marshall of the airport's legal counsel, Anderson and Krieger. Ms. Marshall, are you here?
Here.
Thank you. Good evening. This open meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded to the public so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment in a period at the end of the meeting. It's listed on the agenda. Usually we have two, but this time we will just have one at the end of the meeting. For this meeting, the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission is convening by video conference via the Zoom app and broadcasting on the Town of Nantucket YouTube channel. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to share your screen, take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All meeting materials have been provided to members of this body, and all meeting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. The ground rules of the meeting are as follows. We're going to turn to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. The way we're going to work this is we have, as I mentioned, the one public comment period at the end of the agenda. But we are going to monitor the chat feature on the YouTube channel throughout the meeting. Vice Chair Gasparo will do that. If people have questions, if members of the audience have questions about things that are not clear, and Mr. Gasparo will determine what are appropriate questions and will introduce them into the discussion. When we get to the public comment session, any public comments that you would like made will be relayed to the commission through Mr. Gasparo. Instructions on how to do this are on the town's website and for the members of the public, and we will do our best to address your comments and questions. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. All right, thank you. The meeting is also being audio, fairly obviously video recorded. The first item on the agenda is the agenda itself, and I would ask if there are any comments or questions from the members of the commission on the agenda. Seeing and hearing none, the agenda is adopted. You have the minutes of the March 10th, 2020 meeting, the draft minutes. Are there any comments or questions on those minutes? May I have a motion from somebody to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Planzer. The motion is made by Mr. Buscarin and seconded by Ms. Planzer to accept the draft minutes. All those in favor, Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo.
Aye.
Thank you. It passed unanimously. The chair votes aye and it's passed unanimously. The next item is the ratification of the March 18th and April 1st, 2020 warrants. Is there a motion to ratify the warrants?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Topham. Is there a second? Is there a
I'll
second? I need a verbal second.
I'll
Second.
second.
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. The motion is made by Ms. Topham and seconded by Mr. Buscarin. All those in favor, how do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That's unanimous ratification of the warrants. Pending leases and contracts as set forth in Exhibit 1. Mr. Rafter, would you explain those, please?
Yes, the first is a contract with Mass Tank Inspection Services. That's a 3-year contract for our annual fuel farm inspection at $153,000 total. The next is another contract with McFarland Johnson for $522,222. And that's for the Safety and Security Project Phase 2 Design Services and Construction Administration and Resident Engineering. Next, we have another contract with McFarland Johnson for $171,623, and that's for the Environmental Assessment, Environmental Impact Report for Part C of our capital improvement projects. And the last is a contract with J.J. Cunningham LLC for $290,696, and that's for pavement markings project 2020. I'll note that on the exhibit, I believe it says it's for runway 1533 and 1230. We are not going to be doing the runway 1230 portion. That was an add alternate that increased the amount above what was viable for the budget. So we'll be doing that work on 1230 in-house.
Are we not deferring the Part C? contract item?
Katie informed me that the McFarland Johnson on-call contract expires prior to the next meeting, and we won't be able to do it at the next meeting because of the expiration of their on-call agreement.
Because I know, Mr. Gasparo, you had some questions about it. Do you want to briefly summarize your questions about it?
Sure.
Please identify yourself.
Arthur Gasparo. I had, just in reviewing the $171,000 contract with McFarland Johnson, some questions related to the scoping of the work that was included. And, having just got this weekend, not really having had a chance to follow up with the questions. I'd like a little more information on that, specific to some of the greenhouse gases reduction targets, the stormwater that's involved. I know, I think you're all aware these are issues. It's related to the fencing project that I've been bringing up, and I would like to have a little bit of input into this contract to fully understand it, which would just take a little bit more time for me personally. So that's where I'm at with it.
Mr. Rafter, do you have a comment in response?
I am not 100% familiar, or certainly not as much as Noah is. If there's any specific questions, I would ask that he attempt to address those.
I'm not sure that Mr. Gasparo, if I understand him correctly, I should let him speak for himself, but I'm not sure he has had the time to spend with this to know what all his questions are. Is that fair?
That's fair. I mean, I've read it all once, and then I was going to formulate the questions. I mean, specific to, I feel like we'd be getting into the weeds a little bit here of the whole commission. To get into the depth of that, I'd be happy to do that. But my understanding was that, by holding this over, I could work with staff. Perhaps they could be addressed. Perhaps I could have a better understanding, and or there could be some modification to the contract in terms of the scope of what work they're going to do. Specifically, there are some points in there where they say they're going to do some stormwater analysis, but then not actually do designs. There are points related to the greenhouse gas studies weren't done for parts A and B, but now they're going to be done for part C. It wasn't clear to me whether this contract was going to cover a retroactive study of parts A and B, which I would hope that it would. And again, I'm not against any of these projects. It's that what I've come to learn is that if they don't get studied properly at this point of the project, then there's very little opportunity for funding for mitigation because it wasn't studied, is what we're told later, or it wasn't scoped. So I would very much appreciate if there was a way to defer this for 1 month. I understand the point with the on-call services contract. Is there a mechanism? And I see Christina is with us as well. Again, I'm not trying to in any way kill any of this.
Arthur, if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just had an idea. I believe later in the meeting, we'll be discussing the possibility of an emergency meeting for an updated FY21 budget. I don't know Katie, do you know off the top of your head the expiration date of the on-call for McFarland?
4/19.
Oh, okay. That's 5 days away. Then I'm going to turn to Christina, and I don't know the contract, whether or not we can extend it another month or.
It's already at the 3 years. It's a 3-year expiration, just so you know.
Yeah, I don't know what the language is, whether or not it says that it will continue month to month, or we have the ability to extend.
Ms. Marshall, do you see a way out of this morass?
We'd be happy to take a look at the contract, and understanding the time pressures that you all are under right now, do that tonight or tomorrow morning. and report back to Tom if that works for
Well,
you.
but we have to take some action now. If this is going to go forward ever. So is there some way that we can approve it subject to this? I mean, you know, under majority rule, Mr. Gasparo can't hold this thing up by himself, but you know, my inclination is that if it's not something that's clear in terms of what the responsibilities and the outcome are, that we should be not going forward with it, but we won't know that until the questions are answered, and the questions all have to be answered, I gather, fairly quickly. So how can we deal with this? Do you have any
Conditional approval would be appropriate if that's what the commission would like to do today.
condition? Can we condition on Mr. Gasparo and I and Mr. Rafter agreeing that it's appropriate to go forward?
I would recommend having some boundaries around the word appropriate in that circumstance that the commission can vote on tonight, giving you some kind of benchmarks for that. But if you have those benchmarks, I think that would be fine.
Mr. Gasparo?
So, I mean, specific to this raises a concern just in of itself, where we're giving the contract essentially and told you must approve this tonight. I mean, I see a problem
Yeah,
structurally.
there is a problem with that, but I don't think we're going to get around that right now.
So, I mean, that needs to be said. You know, specific, one of the, you know, points that came out to me is that, you know, on page A8, you know, it's assumed the project will not increase passenger vehicle fleet main operations or other traffic, so no increase in emissions could occur. Therefore, it's assumed vehicle traffic emissions do not need to be formally modeled. So that's just one, you know, clause of this. But to me, again, I feel that this is what I've seen in the past and been told it's too late, because these kind of studies weren't included in the scoping of these environmental studies, and then you know the horse is out of the barn. And again, I feel like if we're going to go through with all of these capital improvement projects and then the consultant is just making certain assumptions as to what they're going to study with no input from us, then I don't feel that's appropriate. And I disagree. So, but back to Ms. Marshall's suggestion, I don't really know how, you know, what we would change. I mean, what I would be looking for or hoping for would be to understand that, in fact, this contract did include modeling of emissions related to all of the CIP projects.
Is that, Mr. Carberg, if I may call on you, do you have a reaction to that?
Yes, I believe Noah Carberg, Assistant Airport Manager. I believe I have some information or interpretation that could be helpful. The scope as it relates to greenhouse gas work is not our scope or McFarland's scope, so to speak. It's given by Mass DEP in their review of these items. It's specific mostly to the crew quarters developments, with, I believe, some very limited aspects related to the GSE building. It's not retroactive to the remainder of the airfield projects. The commission is free to elect to scope those efforts, but it would be on their own funding and on their own accord. Sorry, I've got a cooking related background. Okay, thank you. The commission could take these elements on, but they would not be federally funded because they are not mandated by either the FAA or the state in its review of the projects.
What happens if Mr. Buscarin?
You know, if this contract lapses between now and the next meeting, I don't see a whole lot of harm in that because they're not going to begin any of these things during this shutdown. I don't think we lose anything by waiting another month or even till the next meeting.
Mr. Carberg, do you want to comment on that?
So my preference would be that this contract goes forward because these items are needed to close out our 5-year capital permitting for the EA, EIR. I believe the schedule has the draft deliverable as June or July. There are, of course, open questions related to COVID, how we might reach or be able to surpass certain benchmarks for species work that requires spring work.
What is
But
the,
it would, the danger is pushing off our project and our CIP list.
what is the connection between this and the engineering contract? Why are they so interdependent?
If I may, this is a task order under the on-call services that contract that we have with McFarland Johnson that expires.
Right.
That is, we're in the process now of reviewing new services, the proposals. So if we don't, we won't have a contract to be able to sign a task order. We won't have a valid contract in place after the 18th.
Is the task order with McFarland Johnson as it stands now?
Yes.
And when is the earliest that we would anticipate a new on-call contract?
I would say at least, well, award at the next meeting, it would be the earliest, I would guess.
But could not this come up under that new contract?
I guess this work could be assigned to another firm if we select one. I would ask Noah if that, I mean, do you see that as an issue? I mean, we could just change this, bring the same scope over.
It's an interesting question. Truth be told, much of this work falls to a common subconsultant by the name of VHB. I would anticipate it could be a delay of on the order of 2 to 3 months. There would be some costs that had been undertaken to this point by MJ, but without reviewing where they are into the scope C, I don't have enough to base a really firm opinion off of at this time.
But if I may, my understanding is when we select a consultant to perform the services, we have the ability to direct them to use sub-consultants as needed. And if it's a sub-consultant that's doing the majority of the work, and Christina, jump in here if I'm really going afoul, but then we could pick another firm, let's say, and have them go to whatever the sub that has the has the most experience with this issue. Once we agree on the scope and get Commissioner Gasparo's questions answered.
Ms. Marshall, do you have an additional comment, thought?
No, I mean, based on what I'm hearing from Tom and from everyone on this at this meeting today, that sounds right. I'm not as familiar with the underlying documents as you all are, but I don't think Tom is going far afield as he thought he might be.
I'm sorry, you sort of
I
drifted
think
off
Tom's
there.
on the right track there.
Mr. Gasparo?
So one point would be if we are, they're at the end of a 3-year contract and we are right now looking at new engineering firms. Why are we going to award a new contract at the 11th hour to this same firm that may not be our engineering firm for the next 3 years?
I believe the thought process was that they had completed all of the other work and have the historical data. And basically, as it says, this is part C. They've done the part A and B work and they're familiar with all the projects and all the aspects of the scope. So that was the thought process. But again, it's not impossible to say, okay, we transfer it over.
And, I mean, they may get the contract again.
It's a possibility. And it's also a possibility that another firm may get it, but still use the sub consultant that's doing the majority of the work. And that's my point, that, you know, if we put a full court press on getting the selection process completed by the next meeting and put this on for the next meeting too, I don't want to speak for Noah, but I'm okay with that. I just don't know what that does overall to delaying any of the potential projects. Noah, can you just recap what the projects are in this again?
There are 3 projects. Noah Carberg, Assistant Airport Manager. There are 3 projects in Scope C. It's the environmental work related for the crew quarters. It's the planning and design of the ground service equipment building by the ARF building on the southwest ramp. And it's the expansion of a land lease for marine storage in the general Sun Island runway 24 approach work. And if I may though, Tom, I believe we did assign the 5-year EA/EIR permitting when we solicited multiple consultants in our last RFQ. So I'm not certain if it would be easy to part ways, as this is still under the EA/EIR. I think we would have to go through not only the formalized selection process, but we would need FAA approval at this point to switch.
I don't know if Christina knows the answer to this or not. My understanding is from the selection process, you select, but then once you do the contract, you have to identify the specific projects with the consulting services.
Well, excuse me just a minute. 2 of these 3 projects don't seem to me to be critical right now. And I can't speak to the 3rd one, which is the marine storage one, but certainly the crew quarters and the equipment building are not top priorities at the moment, as I see it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, Mr. Chairman.
May I though, they are part and parcel of every of the other 10 projects on the EA/EIR. So the permitting cannot go forward for any of the projects until these projects are completed, unless we de-scope those from the document.
And that includes Taxi Echo? Is that correct? Or?
That's my understanding. Even though we have the phase 1 MEPA waiver for Taxiway Echo, they are still tied into the completion of the EA/EIR.
My other question that I had was, related to why is the airport taking on all of the environmental work related to expanding the boatyard? And again, this is kind of where I felt like all of these questions were going to get into the weeds in a group discussion, and could have probably been addressed at a staff level. But
that by taking that permitting on, we then are permitted to put it out and have a tenant occupy that land and pay us additional rent. That was the intent.
I would like to hear from the other commissioners what they feel, how they feel about this. If anybody care to speak up.
Hi.
Go ahead, Mrs. Topham. You're on mute again. You're
Oh,
on
Sorry, there we go. I would prefer to have Mr. Gasparo's questions answered before we go forward on this particular item. And is that going to make it be much more expensive, or what is that going to do to the cost? Does anybody know?
I'm not sure that the costs are really the relevant question. I think the time and certainly in terms of the Taxiway Echo grant is the critical question here.
Thank you.
If I may,
Aaron?
I'm sorry.
Well, the taxiway echo thing, we really need that above everything else.
Right.
It appears to me we might want to go ahead and approve this contract, subject to some correction. I don't know if the contract within the frame of the contract, it has some ability to adjust it as we go forward. But if we approved it today, the contract itself may may have a facility within it to amend it to correct whatever thing we don't see today.
If,
Ms.
if I may,
Flanzer, do you have a view? Ms. Flanzer?
Yes, I like that idea too, Tony, of go ahead and approve if there's some way we can, limit it in the future or whatever. We can scope out these issues.
Mr. Rafter?
I was just going to say, just for the commissioner's information too, when we talk about taxiway Echo, we all know it's a critical project and it's, time sensitive, moving along quickly. You'll see when I get into my report later, there's a potential that we could receive 100% funding for that out of this new CARES Act, which means we would not have to pay any sponsor share and it would save us about $1 million. I just want to put that out there so everybody has that information.
And to clarify, correct me if I'm wrong, that means that the project has to be fully signed, sealed, and delivered before the end of the fiscal year. Is that correct?
Not, well, the grant application must be in, at this point in time, it's still May 1st. So we just moved the bid opening back to Friday. It was scheduled for tomorrow, I think, or Thursday. So we moved it to Friday, but we have to get the bids in by May 1. And in order for, or the application, in order for them to consider the application, they have to have some level of certainty that the permitting is going to be completed in time.
Anybody else have anything they want to say on this? I agree philosophically with Mr. Gasparo that these are things that need to be discussed, and if there's any way we can figure out to hammer them out with the engineer and the consultant, we should do that. But I am sympathetic to the ripple effect of not postponing this. Now, I do think, we shouldn't be up against the wall this way. It's not good. But we are on this particular point. I agree with all the other things Mr. Gasparo said, but if a motion is made to approve it, I'm going to vote for it.
What if, taking off on Tony's idea, Commissioner Biscarin, if it's approved subject to resolution or some language of whatever, Commissioner Gasparo, come to a resolution with that. Meaning we'll go back and if
And it all has to be done by Friday, right?
I would guess, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not willing to take that chance, unfortunately.
If we had nothing better to do, I'd say sure.
All right. Mr. Gasparo,
I would just say I understand
thank you.
the commissioner's, points. I not happy sort of this is how it went. Specific to, part A and B didn't include this analysis. The first page of part C says that to analyze, this for the full CIP where required, but then the document's not clear. But again, I don't want to beat this horse to death, and I'm hearing that, we may just have to agree to disagree on this one.
Thank you. Anything else from anybody? Is there a motion to approve the contracts, or should we take this one out of the others, remove it from the other three, vote on the other three, and then vote on this if there are any conditions placed on it? Why don't we do that? So we'll vote on the other three contracts. Would you recap them again quickly, please, Mr. Rafter?
Yes, the three would be the contract with Mass Tank Inspection Services for $153,000, 3-year contract. A contract with McFarland Johnson for $522,222 for security phase 2, and a contract with JJ Cunningham LLC for $290,696 for the pavement markings project for runways 1533.
I would make a motion to approve those contracts.
Thank you, Mr. Gasparo. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. The motion is made by Mr. Gasparo and seconded by Mr. Buscarin. How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. All right, we have the second contract. The other item is the contract with McFarland Johnson for the Part C EIR. Is there a motion with respect to that contract?
Make a motion to approve that contract.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Planzer. Any further discussion? The motion is made by Mr. Buscarin and seconded by Ms. Planzer. How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Reluctantly, aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
No.
And the chair votes aye, so it's 4-1 in favor of approving the contract. Thank you, and I think it's a good discussion we had, and I appreciate your bringing it up, Mr. Gasparo. The next item is the crew quarters development.
You may recall that the Long Range Planning Committee had approved transferring $300,000 into the fund for the housing project. And I will expand on this later when we get into the financials, but I'm asking that that be reconsidered and that we do not take that action at this time.
I don't recall, did the commission approve that?
I believe they did, yes. And as we go through the financial update, Dan, yeah, that is one, I believe it was approved by commission, but not yet at the ATM.
Well, do we need a separate vote on that, or will the vote on the proposal for the financial proposal take care of that? I guess we should take a separate vote on it.
Yeah, that's probably appropriate.
All right, I will entertain a motion to reverse the decision from, I guess, the last meeting, the March 10th meeting, to apply, subject to town meeting approval, $350,000 from retained earnings to the crew quarters development project.
That was 300,000, Dan.
300,000, I'm sorry, 300,000.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Planzer. Any further discussion? How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Thank you, Ms. Topham. Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Ms. Planzer,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. That passes unanimously. All right, the Town Government Study Committee, is there anything new on that, Mr. Rafter?
The only thing I'd like to say is that the new town meeting date is currently scheduled for Saturday, May 2nd at 9 o'clock. And I think that may even be subject to change. They're having some challenges determining how they're going to be able to physically do that. And, you know, with social separation, and also whether or not a quorum would be present. So they're looking at various solutions as to how other towns have done it. And they're kicking around a number of ideas that are going to could have a very significant impact on us, especially as it gets into the security phase 2 project. If the town meeting does not occur before the FAA deadline for grant applications, that could jeopardize the project. Currently, the FAA deadline is May 1st, but there is talk that that will be extended. So we have to see what comes first, the chicken or the egg on this one. And again, that's exactly why we were proposing this warrant article for just such an issue. The timing just doesn't work with all of our projects. So We've made Brian Turbot aware of that. We're going to be having a call with him next week to go over that and any other potential impacts that delaying the town meeting may have on some of our projects.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Rafter. The North Ramp space allocation policy.
Yeah, I believe that was presented at the last meeting for review, and that's to provide large air carrier access assignments and conflicts due to weather, irregular operations and delays. This summer it may not be an issue, but it's when it gets very crowded out there, that's why we instituted, or we'd like to institute this policy.
Are there any questions or comments on it? Is there a motion to approve the policy?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Gasparo. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Buscarin. On a motion made by Mr. Gasparo and seconded by Mr. Buscarin to approve the North Ramp allocation policy. Is there any further discussion? How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? The chair votes aye. Thank you. All right, here you go, Mr. Here's your shining moment, Mr. Rafter.
Oh, boy. First, let me
Financial impacts discussion.
Yeah, we have a number of items here, but I'd first like to say that I want everybody to recognize and understand that Jamie has been doing tremendous work, a lot of it under a lot of pressure. What I'm going through just here is just some of the things she's dealing with. She's been under some extreme time frame pressures from FAA to go back a number of years and get different things in order so that we can get the funding from the CARES Act. So I just want everybody to know she's done a tremendous job with that. First,
We'll give her a finder's fee.
Yeah, I wish. First, we have the FY20 financial impacts due to the COVID crisis, and through the remainder of the fiscal year, what the projections are that we're looking at. And as you'll see in your packet, the revenues are anticipated to be about $907,000 less than budget for an estimated total of $8.4 million. The expenses are anticipated to be about $143,000 less than budget for an estimated total of $9.5 million. This results in a shortfall of $1.164151. So we have a deficit gap to make up of 1.16. After the standard transfer that we do every year of the 400,000 from PFC, the shortfall is reduced to $764,000. Previously approved by the commission, but awaiting ATM approval, is the transfer from retained earnings of $400,000 into the operating budget, a transfer from the stabilization fund of $27,500 into salaries budget. And what we're asking for now is, we're estimating an additional $336,851 will be needed to be transferred from retained earnings that hasn't been approved by commission and is not currently in the ATM. I want to emphasize too that all of these numbers are best estimates. Jamie does a tremendous job with her forecasting, but everything is extremely fluid. You will see as we go on here, I made 5 different versions of my report tonight because of the changes just made today. So we're going to ask the commission as we move forward in some of these to give some flexibility, whether it is to Jamie with approval of the chair or whatever, but we need to be able to really be very fluid and move quickly to provide the numbers to town, to get them onto a new warrant, to get a new budget approved, to get to FinCom, to get through to Capcom, and to apply for any CARES grants. So there's a lot of moving parts here. So in addition to the $336,000 that we're looking at the following transfers from capital projects. And I asked Jamie to correct me if I'm wrong, but these are essentially some cleanup items, some from capital projects. There's 4,178 from the Apron Area 3 project, 178,614 from airfield paint and beads and rubber removal. The 300,000 that we talked about earlier from the housing or Nobody or Farm Road development, and another 300,000 from security system upgrades. We're also looking at a $50,000 from the salary and wage budget. So we would like to ask that we're also going to be asking the town for a deferral of our subsidy obligation for FY20 and FY21. And I believe there's a draft letter that was either in the packet or as a handout from the chair and myself to.
Excuse me, was that posted, that letter,
I have to ask Katie
Katie?
or Lil.
Because I have to specify whether it was previously made publicly available. Katie?
I'm gonna say yes, but right now I'm gonna look because I
Okay.
have it up. Okay.
Thank you.
If it's a no, I'll wave my hand for you to call me again.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So if all the transfers are made, and it's estimated, and I use that term very tightly or loosely, if you will, estimated, that we might be able to end the year with a retained earnings balance of $1.7 million. At this point in time, this will definitely not be sufficient to offset the FY21 losses due to the amount of time it is anticipated for the industry to recover. We are looking most definitely right now at a subsidy requirement from the town for FY21. And the gap that Jamie is looking to fill right now is $1.8 million. We relayed that information to Brian Turbot today. And again, we'll be having a call with him next week to go over some of this in detail. Now, there is a chance that this CARES money could help some of that. But as the chairman and I spoke earlier, initially, if you were to follow the normal process, it takes a long time to get into the proper areas, meaning most reimbursements come in, they fall to retained earnings, that gets certified, but it doesn't get certified in time for your budget that's at the town meeting. So it's a lag year. So it's about 1.5 years away. We had a discussion with Brian Turbot today where he believes if we're able to get these funds, that there is a way to make that happen on a more real-time type basis. So again, the challenge I think we're facing in looking at our industry, the airlines are going to be very hard to come back full strength for quite a while. Not so many people are inclined to get on a aircraft right now. We may see a little bit more of a comeback in our corporate GA side, but not so much in the commercial immediately. And we believe it's going to last quite a bit. So if you look at the bottom part of that update too, though, in the fuel revolver, there's a chance we could have a balance of about $1.2 million after FY20. We need to look closely at what the cap will be. But it's critical, I think, that we keep that there because right now fuel is at an all-time low. We don't know if that's going to jump back up. Again, the uncertainty of the business, but we need to have the resource to be able to purchase the fuel in either situation. So the fuel revolver's doing okay, but I wouldn't look to that too much. So for this meeting, I guess what we're looking for is not necessarily approval to make the transfers that Jamie has identified, but the option to make those transfers and some flexibility if we need to adjust those numbers, to make it work. Because again, we don't know what the rest of the year is going to bring. We've done the estimates, but are we going to have more revenue than we anticipate or less? We just don't know. We don't know what the industry is going to be doing over the next 2 weeks, let alone the next 3 months. So
Ms. Marshall, do you see any issue with our approving a very broad motion to give the airport management the discretion to determine the amounts to be involved in all this with perhaps the approval of the chair and the vice chair?
I do not. I have taken a look at this letter and understand the airport manager's kind of position with how uncertain the money is now. And I think that's appropriate. I would suggest that the airport staff keep a very close eye on the amounts that are ultimately requested and subsidized from the town for any future reimbursement agreements, because FAA will be very strict about complying with that in the future. So
No, but I was talking about specifically these transfers that might be needed before the end of the fiscal year in order to keep us square this year, but not overspend, if you will.
Right.
And we're not looking for a subsidy from this year. The subsidy would be from next year's budget, and we haven't even gotten to that budget yet.
but if I may, an example where we're looking at estimated $336,000 additionally needed from retained earnings, that could be up to $350,000.
Or it could be 275.
Right. So, but we're going to need to provide these numbers for whatever the warrant's going to look like at town meeting. And it's going to be literally right up to the end minute, that we're going to come up with the most correct numbers or, best.
So what I'm suggesting is that the motion might,
Mr. Buscarin had his hand up.
oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Buscarin?
We might approve the larger number, and that gives them some flexibility, and then we can amend that downwards at the following meeting. If it's
Can we make it up to? Say up to, and then we wouldn't have to amend it
Yes.
in the future.
The challenge, I think, Dan, is that if you put a cap, let's say, on it and say up to 336,000 and we need 350 or 400,000, we're not going to have the time, I don't think, between meetings, because again, they're going to be rushing to put together whatever this warrant's going to look like for the town meeting.
Especially if it happens on May 2nd.
Well, and there's a one train of thought that it may be that the only items on the town meeting are any budget or financial related items. The town has been given, and the state has given, I guess, all towns some flexibility if in fact they don't have a town meeting before the end of the fiscal year. But again, the further we go, the more it changes, and literally by day it's changing.
Ms. Planzer?
I wonder, could we do like an emergency meeting or something if we need it? Like,
You're most likely going to need an emergency meeting for the FY21 budget. But again, that's a budget. This is more of the, I'll call it the actual.
These are the year-end adjustments, basically. But they have to happen. I don't know how long far ahead of town meeting they have to publish the warrant, final warrant. I don't think they know. But it seems to me that we've got to create a situation with the maximum flexibility here. And therefore, if Ms. Marshall thinks it's appropriate, I would ask for a motion to give the airport manager the authority to determine the necessary amounts for the various transfers, subject to the approval of the chair and the vice chair. Is that all right, Mr. Rafter?
And if I may, just so the commission is aware, I mean, our intent here is to balance the budget for the actuals for the end of the year, so that we, can get through the rest of this year, but also, maximize what we can that falls to retained earnings, because we're desperately going to need it next year. So Yeah, I like what you said, Dan. I just want everybody to get a comfort level that we're not, it's not like we're looking to go out and spend a lot of money or anything. It's just the opposite. We're not spending anything and we're just trying to, because we have no income coming in.
So do you think, Ms. Marshall, does that make sense?
Yes, I
You
think
think
the
it's
way
permissible?
I do. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there such a motion?
We have an amount of money we're talking about, a maximum amount of money, and approve that. Is that the idea?
No, we're going to leave it open just because we don't know what other curveballs might come our way. So we leave it, it will be, what the motion would do would be give the airport manager the authority to determine the amounts that are necessary and require him to get the approval of the chair and the vice chair to submit those to the town for the warrant.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? I can't hear you.
Aye.
Thank you. And the chair votes aye. Thank you. I should have said that the motion was made as it was by Mr. Buscarin and seconded by Ms. Planzer. So I think we have what we need, right, Mr. Rafter?
For FY20, yes. Now, the next section deals with the FY21 budget. And as I said, both the town and Jamie for us at the airport are beginning to formulate what an FY21 budget looks like. And it will have to be submitted in its entirety for the ATM. As I mentioned, Jamie is looking to fill a $1.8 million shortfall at this point in time.
Do you think it'll be decided tomorrow night when the ATM is by the Board of Select Board?
I don't know if, I just looked at their agenda briefly today. I don't know, Dan, if that's on there or not. I think they're probably, looking around to see how other towns are doing it, but I don't know.
I mean, what would be the time? What do you estimate will be the timing for this extra meeting we need? I mean, I don't know that it matters to many of us because we're all around, but
it may be, within a 2-week period. But it also may be that there's talk of trying to extend the town meeting further, because my understanding is, and I forget the date, but Brian Turbin indicated that the state said you can go beyond it. And I thought he said for 30 days and draw down on your retained earnings to, basically keep the operation running.
I mean, 30 days beyond the end of the fiscal year?
Yes. So, they may push it into June.
Or July?
Yeah.
All right.
I had heard a rumor that, maybe they do it outside at the football field. I don't know.
All right. Well, stay tuned. There will be presumably a special meeting.
And there's a chance it may not be. If in fact it does get pushed back further, we might be able to capture it in our normal schedule, but I would anticipate probably within a 2-week period, a special meeting.
Okay, thank you. Anything further on the fiscal 21 budget?
Not on the 21 budget, no, but.
All right, the next item is lease payment abatement and deferment discussion.
Yes, it's a draft policy discussion. We're not the only ones obviously being impacted by this. A number of our tenants have either been completely restricted from working or have been severely limited on the services that they can provide. We've received at least 3 requests from our tenants Crosswinds, Tidal Creek, and Blade for some relief or consideration. The FAA initially came out with some guidelines on deferrals and abatements, and then they updated those. So what we did in light of that and working with Christina, we tried to put together a framework of what we would like approval on for a policy for rental deferments. And I can go through that as it stands. Again, we were just simply putting together framework. It's open for discussion, but I just wanted to hit on the key points, and then maybe Christina can help me with explaining to you some of the things that we are allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. So let me see here. In summary, the policy is to defer 50% of rent for a 3-month period with no interest. And then for the following 3 months, pay the normal rent or 100%. And then the following 6 months, pay 125% of the rent. It is not applicable to airlines or government agencies, as there's a separate funding package for the airlines, and the governments have been paying the bills all along. For those that pay an annual fee, such as the car rentals, we would allow them to pay on a quarterly basis. And for the advertising, we're looking at giving them 1 month reduction in their fees, which in consultation with another airport, they are doing the same type of thing. So in addition, the restaurant has requested consideration from the retail operation because of the drop in passenger traffic. They had previously requested that, but they're reiterating that again, that they get some relief for that separate retail or to-go operation that's in the terminal. So again, this is some basic framework that we put around it. Initially, I believe the FAA was not allowing abatements. I think they may have considered allowance of abatements now, but they're not encouraging that.
Ms. Marshall, do you have anything you want to add before I open it up for discussion to the commission?
Yes, so just to give you all some framework here, FAA has published guidance on a number of issues relating to COVID-19 and restrictions and accommodations at airports. They have specifically addressed deferral of rental payments, both on the aeronautical side and the non-aeronautical side. And their guidance says that airports may defer the collection of rents and fees if it's reasonable and necessary for the airport to do so. They specifically acknowledge that the self-sustainability principle is to keep the airport solvent, and you have to weigh collecting money from tenants versus having the tenants default entirely if they're not able to pay the rents that you're charging at this time. So deferrals are appropriate. They are allowing airports to charge interest on deferrals if you would like. They're not requiring interest unless the deferral period exceeds 1 year. And I don't think anyone's quite there yet. And then finally, they have opined that airports are not permitted to waive at this point landing fees and terminal rents. And if an airport would like to do something like that, they should go to FAA directly.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may ask Christina a question. We had put in the policy, Christina, that this would be an optional, you have to opt into this deferral policy, meaning there may be some that don't elect to, but others that would like to. Do you see any problem with that, or?
No, as long as the option is equally available to all your tenants, I don't see any issues with discriminating between the tenants. It's at their option if they'd like to, and if their finances require it or not.
Okay, thank you.
I'll open it up to the commission. Are there any comments or questions or thoughts of other ways of going about this?
What Tom said sounds fine to me.
I might suggest one thing I don't know that we put in there, but we intended to, was that this may be subject to review at a later date, because again, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months, and we may have to look at this again. So, but that's all. I would assume that could be a given, if you will.
Well, I guess my question is that sort of a signal to people that we are going to look at it again. I'd be inclined to take, it's a policy, so we can change the policy in the
Right.
future. I'd be inclined to just let it go without that, subject to what other people think.
I agree with Dan.
I'm sorry?
I agree with Dan. I think it makes more sense just to tell them, here's the policy, and that's it. And, if we want to amend it in the future, well, we do it then, but we don't tell them in advance.
Now that we've told them.
I guess, get wind of it.
Anybody else? Ms. Topham, do you have any thoughts?
I think it's a good idea. I think we have to do something under these circumstances.
Ms. Planzer, do you have any additional thoughts?
Nothing really additional. I like it. I think it's good. It's an offer, and then we can, amend it as we see fit, as things go on and we see.
I guess one question to pick up on Ms. Planzer's point. They opt in. Is there a time limit for them to opt in? Should there be a time limit for them to opt in?
I would guess, yeah, we should probably, establish that you have until X date and the reason we're looking for approval tonight is because obviously they're being impacted as we speak and have already been impacted. So we want to try to get this out as fast as possible and turn it around so that, folks know where they stand.
I don't know how our collections have been for April 1st, but would this apply from April 1st or from May 1st?
I'll try to answer that, and then Jamie will correct me when I'm wrong. I think for those that have paid for April, it would begin in May. And for those that did not pay in April, it would begin in April. Is that correct, Jamie?
Yeah, I'll retro it if they want to opt in for April if they haven't paid yet.
Or what if they say, well, can I apply 50% of April to May?
I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Right.
Yeah, it's just a 3-month period, whenever it's.
So,
But I mean, are we?
I mean, I suppose I
are we
could go
willing-
back and reapply the,
Are we willing to
payment.
do that? Should we be willing to do that?
I don't think it would be that difficult for me to do. I would just need it. I need to know.
I
Is
mean,
that-
in terms of your projections, have you basically assumed everybody will opt in?
Yes.
Okay.
Dan, I'm not sure that would be consistent in treating everybody the same way if some have already paid and some haven't. I don't know.
Ms. Marshall, what do you think of that?
Can you, sorry, Mr. Rafter, can you just explain what you're getting at?
I believe, and Dan, it was your idea. I think what you're saying is if they've already paid April, that they take the credit for April and May. Is that what you're saying, Dan?
Yeah, basically that they apply 50% of their April payment to their May payment.
So it'd be a 0 May because you already paid your full April.
Right.
I guess it doesn't.
It's in the policy, isn't it? If saying if they don't take it, then you'll apply it to May, June, and July.
Right, but what Dan is then saying is if you paid your full rent, let's say in April, could you come back and say, okay, don't charge me anything for May, just apply my 100, split my 100% amongst April and May.
Okay.
I think
So-
at the end of the day, it doesn't make a financial difference that anyone would have a problem with, because if they're electing to split their April rent between April and May, then they don't get to extend this into July.
Okay.
Whereas
Right.
the 3 months would start later for the other.
Okay. I don't know how to word that in a policy, but we can.
I don't think we do. I don't think we
Let
try.
him
I think we-
ask.
Jamie on the how to apply it. Yeah.
Yeah. If somebody comes and requests it, she knows how to respond.
Correct.
Mr. Gasparo, do you have any comments on it?
I'm supportive of the policy and appreciate you guys putting it together.
Is there a motion to approve the rent abatement policy as set forth in the handout?
I just
I'll
said,
make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there further discussion? Ms. Topham has moved to approve the rent abatement policy, and Mr. Buscarin has seconded. How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Ms. Topham,
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? And the chair votes aye. Good job on that. Thank you.
Jamie and Noah and Deb and everyone else involved.
Thank you
Um,
very much.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you all for all your work on this. It's a lot going on. The CARES Act grant acceptance.
So this was a last minute addition based on information that we received today. And what we will be seeking is the commission to authorize the chair to accept any and all grants and apply for any and all grants associated with the CARES Act. And I'll give you a briefing on the CARES Act and what it is and how some of this may work. It's the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. There's $10 billion in funding divided into 4 groups for airports with formulas for each group. We fit into 3 of the 4 groups and are moving forward to take advantage of as much of this as possible. It's been identified on the FAA website that of the 3 groups that we fit into, 2 of those would result in about $6.2 million to the airport. And I'll get into that in just one second. The first group would be 100% of federal share for 2020 AIP grants. And I referred to this earlier as our Taxiway Echo project. Rounding numbers, if that's a $20 million job, the sponsor share for that, our share would be about $1 million. This would make that 100% FAA funded and save us about $1 million. We're also looking to try to have that applied into the security project as well. We don't have the exact numbers yet, but we're working on those. The second area that we fit into is commercial service airports, and there's $7.4 billion available to commercial service airports for any purpose for which airport revenues may lawfully be used. And then it breaks it down into a fairly detailed formula in 3 different steps. It's split into different areas, and it has to do with the debt service ratio. It has to do with your enplanements. So FAA has calculated that section as well as the next one, which is primary airports. There's up to $2 billion available to large, medium, and small hub airports and non-hub airports, which we are, for any purpose which airport revenues may be lawfully used. This does include salaries as well as other expenses. Again, that one is based on our primary entitlements. So excluding the one for the 100% FAA grant funding for FY20 projects, if we look at the other 2, between those 2, according to the FAA website that came out this afternoon, we're looking at about $6.2 million. And the thought process right now is that we would apply that primarily to salaries as well as debt service. And that may, and I'm going to use the word may, capital bold letters, get us through next year with a much smaller, maybe even no subsidy. I don't want to be guaranteed that yet, but we're going to look at it. We're allowed to go back to January 20th of this year. And then you can go forward until the money is expended. So Jamie's working on looking at the numbers with this, working with our consultants for the application process. When I tell you this is moving fast, they indicated today on a conference call that they want to have the grants out next week. So they quickly dispersed out today what some of the applications may look like. We have people working on that. And that's why I'm asking that the commission give the chair the authority to execute any and all agreements necessary for us to get any of that funding that's available. I don't want to lose. I want to be first in line for that 6.2 million plus. So with your permission, I'd like to ask that you approve that, give the chairman that authorization.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'm sorry, who, you made the motion, Mrs. Topham, right? And Ms. Planzer seconded?
Correct.
Is there a further discussion? The motion, as I understand it, is to enable the chair to execute any documents which will enable the airport to participate in CARES Act funding from the FAA. Is that correct, Mr. Rafter?
FAA or DOT.
Or Mass DOT?
No, not Mass DOT. This because
Department of Federal Department of Transportation.
Yeah, this money is coming out of the general fund budget of the federal government under DOT. May not necessarily be an FAA account. So
it's not necessarily CARES Act either, or is it?
it is CARES Act.
Okay.
Yep.
It's all CARES Act, but it might come from the FAA or the Department of Transportation.
Correct.
All right. How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye and accepts the responsibility with gratitude.
Okay.
All right, good. Now on to the easy stuff, project updates and
Yeah.
the manager's report.
You think it's easy. Security project phase 1, we received an exemption from the town under their emergency order, and work is continuing with the appropriate safety precautions being taken. As I mentioned earlier, security phase 2, we received the bids. A low bidder has been determined. However, final award is subject to the appropriation of additional funds at the ATM, and I mentioned the concerns earlier. EAEIS we discussed earlier. PFC application number 2. We had a user consultation meeting this afternoon, or this morning rather. One airline attended, it was Delta. They called in. There were no objections and they felt that everything was in order. Just a reminder that under application number 1 through the end of last year, we collected $3.2 million and we have another 3.7 million remaining to collect. That application expires in 2024 or sooner or later, which most likely going to be later given the projection of the industry now. And then application number 2 is for $1.1 million. The proposed effective date is May 1, 2024. It would be that or the expiration of the first one. And then proposed expiration would be June 1, 2029. The fuel farm rehabilitation project, I think I mentioned that earlier. We've been advised that that project is most likely going to have to be bid out into 2 separate projects. And that could be a little bit of a benefit because financially it might help us spread out some of the capital. So most likely we're going to proceed with the, what I'll call the plumbing and actual fuel farm work, the pumps and things like that in the fall, and then follow that up when we can with the fire suppression detection systems. Taxiway Echo, the bids were initially due in this Thursday. There was a blip with electronic bidding. It has now been extended to Friday. Again, they'll be opened electronically. And as I mentioned, there's a possibility that we get 100% funding for that. Airfield markings, you awarded that earlier to JJ Cunningham. We had a conversation with them, and they have a crew that's in Florida right now that's been pulled off of a job because of the COVID-19 crisis. As soon as they can get back to work and finish that, they would then come over to our airport. Our intention was to get that completed by the FAA certification, but it's not looking like that may happen. And again, we were trying to get it before our peak season or before JetBlue came in, but now that they've pushed back to June, we may have them working here in May, or it may even be as late as next fall. We also received an exemption from the town for the work to be done on the Thompson House for the point of entry treatment system for the PFAS for treating the water out there, and that project is moving along. On the RFP and bid status update, the request for expression of interest for the hangars is on hold, as well as the freight hangar. We've just put that aside until we can get back to some level of normal operation. Post-screening concession opportunity, the bids are due this Friday. We'll be opening those.
Excuse me, Mr. Rafter, on the freight hangar, so the tenant continues as a month-to-month tenant, is that correct?
As long as they abide by all airport rules and regulations, yes.
Okay, thank you.
The planning and architectural services, we received 2 proposals. They're under review. On the RFQ for engineering, we received 5 proposals. They are also under review. The fuel farm inspection contract was awarded earlier, security phase 2. We talked about that. IFB for, we talked about Echo, pavement markings coming up. I don't know why I think we have automatic door maintenance because I have fuel farm rehab, again, that split up. So Katie's developed the IFB for the automatic door maintenance. And we're closely reviewing any and all things that we put out with regard to our 21 budget. On the operations side of the house, I sent out on April 1st, I believe, an update to the commissioners identifying how we're currently operating the airport with regard to staffing, some of the specific COVID-19 issues, and some of the intricacies, changes that we've had to make to be able to, for example, open bids virtually, open proposals virtually. We had to establish a lock mailbox outside. So a number of procedural changes. We're also working on, we began last week planning on what I would consider two plans. One is a reconstitution of operations and the other is a return to work program. The reconstitution of operations, if you go through the full phase of the FEMA continuity of operations, phase 4 is reconstituting your operations. So we're looking at, and we're considering that to be anywhere where our employees may have an interface with the public and what actions we will take to protect our staff, whether it's physical barriers, it's protective equipment, sanitizing things, all those. And I've assigned different senior staff various buildings, and they're to come up with each building what they're going to be doing, and we're going to be looking at some, I would say, interesting changes for this summer operation as we get back into some almost full level of service, but not quite. We're also working on an employee-to-employee contact, and I'll consider that the return to work program. I did have a conversation with the assistant town manager, Greg Tivnan, today, and he indicated that they are working on guidelines for office personnel. So we're going to let them take the lead, and we're be happy to give any input, but we want to see what they're coming out with on that. We have our FAA certification inspection scheduled for May 27th through the 29th. And I know there was concern about conflict and things. The conference that was a conflict has been canceled. And unfortunately, though, I've been notified that I have to be in a medical appointment on the 29th. So I may miss some of that certification inspection. I will see if I can get that rearranged, but I'm not sure because it's pre-op type stuff. So air service impacts related to COVID crisis. we have, well, Cape Air is down to about 2 flights each to Boston and to Hyannis. Southern Airways has delayed opening from April 17th until May 22nd. JetBlue has delayed our opening from May 14th until sometime in June, and I think that may be subject to change. They have announced through a DOT, I believe, petition that they're shutting down LaGuardia and White Plains service and consolidating that through Kennedy and Newark, at least through June 10th. United is seeking via DOT exemption to cancel all summer service here in Nantucket. And Delta has filed something, we're not sure if it's an actual deferral of the service or cancellation or what it is. And no change yet on American. The thing I want everybody to know is that airports have up to 3 days to object to these. And I think they filed them on Saturday or Sunday. And I believe, Christina, if I'm not mistaken, that you had indicated a number of your clients are not objecting to it. I don't think that there's a significant benefit to objecting to it other than maybe upsetting the airlines. So is that a true statement?
That's correct. At this point, I'm actually not aware of any airports objecting to these notices.
Okay. Any questions before I go on to statistics? Okay, and we don't have the PowerPoint, but maybe for next meeting, if we're still virtual, we'll be able to do that with a shared screen, but we had enough hurdles to cover the virtual aspect. So I'll walk you through it in a narrative format. Operations are up 27.66 over last February, and year to date up 19.5. GA ramp operations for February were up 5%. Things are going good in February and March. Enplanements down 16.6 over last February, but up 5.4. Cape Air saw a 5% decrease in enplanements. Nantucket Air was up 88% or 303 passengers. Tradewinds was up 10 passengers. Boston Market Cape Air had a 9% decrease or 75 passengers. New Bedford traffic was down 53% or 78 passengers. The Hyannis Market Cape Air was down 5% or 59 passengers. Nantucket Air was up 88 or 303. Overall, Hyannis Market was down 17% or 343 passengers. Vineyard traffic, now I hope everybody's sitting down for this one, was up 827% to 91 passengers. I don't know what happened. Jet A gallons sold for February were down 43.7%. Year to date up 2%. And for March, they're up 54%. Again, these are high percentages, but at that time of year, February and March, not significant swings. So it balances out. Avgas is up 45.2% February and up year to date just slightly, about 0.1%. March, they're down 32.8%. Freight for February is down 14.06% over last February and year to date 1.2%. We are seeing indications, and we do have some reports of the freight that has increased dramatically because of the COVID related situation. I spoke to an individual that works for FedEx when I picked up a delivery for American Airlines the other day. And he indicated that they are currently doing the volume that they would normally do in June. And he's making deliveries to homes that would not normally be open at this time of year. I'll leave it at that. Noise, no complaints in February or March, and there were 0 for last March. Any questions on statistics before going to personnel? Under personnel, I just want to mention that in the past, the commission had considered a telecommute / remote work policy. And that was essentially when Janine was looking to work remotely. We're going to be opening that up again and asking the commission for consideration. Even when things, if you will, when the employees return to work, there's still going to be school closings and there's going to be daycare issues and there's going to be a number of other concerns that we have. And so we're going to at least take another shot at it and take a look at it, and we'll get it out to the commission for your review. But I just wanted to get that on the radar because it's something I think we're desperately going to need to use as a tool. There's something called the Family First Act, and there was an HR advisory. I sent that out to the commissioners earlier today. It gives an extra 2 weeks of emergency sick leave to employees if it's related to the COVID-19 crisis, and there are 6 different categories and what they're entitled to in terms of compensation and so on and so forth for that. And that is all I have for my report.
Thank you, Mr. Rafter. Are there any questions from the commission?
Dan, I'm sorry if I may, I was remiss. I meant to let the commission know that all staff have been working very diligently during this. It's not as though they're sitting home doing nothing. They're working, there's emails flying all day and night, weekends, everything. We have a number of staff on site, and things are getting done, but we really do need to start amping it up a little bit to get some folks back in to get some of the physical things done and ready for certification inspection. But I want to commend our staff for doing a tremendous job and keeping the airport operational. You can see things are moving on the fly, and there's money being out there, given out there that we're going to be taking advantage of. So just wanted to let them know everybody's doing a great job there.
Commissioners' comments.
I personally want to thank the staff for all their hard work under these very difficult situations. I really appreciate it. And Mr. Rafter keeps praising you. Well, I'm praising you also. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else? I have a couple of things. One, you have received a draft of a letter which was submitted to you more for approval of the concept of asking the town for a deferral on of the fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21 repayment, and extending the life of the repayments for 2 years. The wording of the letter is probably going to change before it's submitted, depending on what we learn about the CARES reimbursements and so forth. But I would ask that for your consent to submit the deferral request. Are there any objections from the commission to doing that?
No, but
None, we will. Mr. Buscarin?
my sense is that I think it's great to send the letter. We may need to take advantage of that deferral, but it seems to me if we're getting CARES money, that we ought to. I like to pay off our debts. That's I don't like to defer debt payments.
Right. Anybody else?
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
When is that next payment due? And is this something, no pun intended, that we could defer for, one meeting just to see what might come in? I mean, I'm
if I may, Brian mentioned today that he is already talking to Libby about this. I'm not sure if he was talking about FY20 or not, but Jamie, do you know that they just take it at the end of the year or how that works?
Yeah, I do an invoice at the end of the year and take out any in-kind services. So I would think that if we do get CARES money and we are able to pay it, then at that point we could, it could be decided, but it would be nice to have the option to have that taken out of the operating budget when there's just so much uncertainty.
Can we make it one more month just to see what might come through? I mean, if the end of the year, it's only April now.
Could we postpone this? Excuse me, Mr. Gasparo, could we postpone it to our special budget meeting?
That makes sense.
I don't see a problem with that. The only impact I think is going to be, and the town is just going to have to make an assumption one way or the other on what they're trying to do this same type of thing, put together what the end of the year is going to look like for them.
Well, if Mr. Turbot is, or the town finance director is already aware of this, then it probably can wait, but I'd rather take it up at a special meeting.
Well, then I'm gonna need to include it as if we are paying it in the fiscal 21 budget that you'll get to review. I'll have to include it as if we are paying it and then take it back out if,
In the fiscal 21.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's all right.
Well, but I guess what Jamie's saying, Dan, is if we do it concurrently at the next meeting, you're going to have a letter approved by our commission, but not granted by the town. And we will have to keep that in our budget until such time. So
Which is the budget that will go to town meeting for approval, presumably.
right.
If I may,
Yes, sir.
the reason I brought it up, I watched the finance committee meeting this afternoon. I don't know if anyone else saw that, but the finance director, did start to raise some concern that the airport could face some challenges given everything that's going on, but he didn't really get into depth. What I took out of it, this is my interpretation, not to put words in his mouth, was that the current fiscal year didn't seem like it would be a problem, and that it would be fiscal 21 that the real hurdles and concerns. And he didn't go so far. I don't think that I
Excuse me, for clarification, are you talking about hurdles and concerns for the airport or hurdles and concerns for the town?
for the airport as related. He went into each of the enterprise funds essentially, and some of the other concerns obviously related to solid waste, our island home, and the airport. But in general, what I took out of it was that there didn't seem to be too much concern with the current fiscal year, and that he just sort of quickly floated out there that the fiscal 21 could be have its challenges. And I don't know that he was quite as specific. I don't think I heard the word subsidy. And part of my raising the question about the letter is one of the members later in the comments had asked, should some of these enterprise funds be looking at increasing their fees and charges as a result of, declining revenues. And to me, that made very clear that there's not a good understanding of the actual emergency situation that's being faced, and that, given the policy letter that we actually just approved, it's the opposite direction. So it's a bit of a triage. Anyway, with respect to the letter, if in fact that could get put off, I'd hate to see us raise additional other concerns that might ripple through the finance committee as well, if we were able to pay it.
It's all about if we get CARES money, if we whatever. But as I said, if it's not approved now, and we try to do it concurrently, approval of sending the letter alone, then we're going to have to include it in our FY21 reforecast budget.
I think my inclination would be to go ahead and send it, condition it on the receipt of CARES money.
I somewhat agree, Dan. I would say, and I don't know the language, but if we receive funds that make it viable or feasible to pay it, because we may get CARES money, but it may not be enough to, I just don't know. We project X revenue, but now it's X minus 10 or 20% or 50% lower than X. And the CARES is only going to pay for, let's say, salaries.
Well,
I agree totally with what Tony's saying. I want to pay it off. If we have the money and we get it, yes. But I just want to, I'm not sure if they're first in line or second in line or what, in terms of what gets cut.
Doesn't hurt to send the letter.
I beg your pardon?
Tony Busquet, it doesn't hurt to send the letter out now. I make a motion to send the letter out. And, if we need to use it, that's fine. If we don't have to stop payments.
Is there a second to Mr. Viscaren's motion?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? All right, we'll take a vote to whether we send the letter now, as the motion by Mr. Buscaren and seconded by Mr. Gasparo says. We will do that. How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Buscaren?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, good, thank you. I think all of these discussions just underscore the point, going back to the Town Government Study Commission discussions we've had, just underscore how difficult it is to operate a business such as the airport in the current political structure that we have here in the town of Nantucket. A lot of these questions would be dealt with much less urgently and much more assuredly if we had a different system to get our budget approved and so forth. I just wanted to make that comment. Finally, I would like to echo Ms. Topham's comments about a shout out to all the airport employees for just to give them our appreciation of their efforts on behalf of the airport and the town under very trying circumstances. All right, thank you. Is there any public comment at this time? This is when the audience is invited to submit comments. Have you gotten any, Mr. Gasparo?
No, but there is a minute or two lag, or a minute or so tops. So maybe we just want to wait a second to see if anything comes up. And I know that it's working because Mr. Carberg has pinged the chat a couple times.
Okay.
There are 13 people watching, and presumably at least 3 of them are us.
Right. While we're giving it a little time to kick in here, Katie, how are we going to go about signing these contracts that we've approved?
It's not clear to me that what level the town is functioning at, where if we do get them signed, where I'm going to send them, and how we can proceed with it. So before I initiate any type of system where we can get them signed, I want to make sure that there's some place that they're going to go once they've been signed.
You mean because they have to be signed off by the finance director?
They have to be signed off by the finance director, and they also have to be like entered in down at the finance department, and things need to be done with that department that isn't necessarily under the finance director, like doesn't normally do those things. So I'm not sure what exactly they're open in doing.
Well, we have to get this one done by the 19th, right?
So in order for you approved it at the meeting, that doesn't mean that it needs to be signed before the 19th. So the approval happened before the expiration. So that doesn't directly relate to when you're signing it.
Okay, thank you. Anything, Mr. Gasparo?
No. Bobby says hi.
All right, then I think we will go into, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to review executive session minutes as enumerated on the agenda uh, for possible release, and the minutes of March 10, 2020 for review and possible release. To discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding the Gatto claim, where the chair has determined that open session may have detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding Walsh, where the chair has determined that open session may have detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. And clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, where the chair has determined that an open meeting may have, that open session may have detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the Airport Commission, not to return to open session.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. All right, thank you all for participating today. The staff